Morning students, today we will be continuing with chapter 6 in chemistry, that is metals and non-metals, and the topic which we will be discussing today is corrosion in metals. Now talking about corrosion is a very natural process in which when the metal is if exposed to air and especially the moist air, then what happens, it starts converting into stable forms. Any pure metal will react with the moist air and start forming compounds like oxides or carbonates or sulfides. So this natural process is known as corrosion, and it is also known as slow destruction of metals. Now when this metal starts forming oxides or carbonates or sulfides when it is exposed to air, its economic use decreases, its quality declines. So because of this we also call corrosion as slow destruction. Though actually it is a natural process in which the pure metal is reacting with the air. Now talking about the corrosion in detail. Now what happens when you expose a metal to moist air, it gets corroded. Corroded means it has converted into stable compound. And usually corrosion occurs on the surface. It forms a layer of that compound over the surface which was exposed to air. Now why this is happening? Why the metals are undergoing corrosion when they are exposed to air? Now what happens, these metals are actually very reactive in nature. Very reactive. So when they are exposed to air, they react with the moist air. That means they react with the gases in the air. They react with the moisture, that means water which is present in air, and they form stable compounds. So this is basically the process which is happening in corrosion. Now what are the changes that takes place in metal during corrosion? First thing, that the properties of metals are destroyed. Their properties are changed completely, and secondly the use as metal diminishes. That means you cannot use it economically. So that is why we do not take it as a positive change. We call it as a destruction of metal. Now let us discuss a few examples. What happens when several metals gets corroded? The first one is the most common example we all have observed in our daily life. We have seen it, we have experienced it, is the corrosion of iron. Now corrosion of iron is also known as rusting. Rusting is a name given only to the corrosion of iron. Remember that. So when iron undergoes rusting or corrosion, that means when it is exposed to moist air, what happens? A reddish brown layer of rust is formed. Now rust is a compound that is hydrated ferric oxide. It's a ferric oxide which is in combination with water, that is why we call it hydrated ferric oxide. So that is, the formula is Fe2O3 for ferric oxide dot XH2O. That is why we call it hydrated ferric oxide. Please remember this formula and this chemical name of rust. This is something that you must know. Now talking about another element, that is aluminium. Now when aluminium is exposed to air, it develops a white layer or a white coating of aluminium oxide, that is Al2O3. Now this aluminium oxide is a very stable compound. So what happens? Normally this coating of aluminium oxide prevents further corrosion of aluminium. What happens, suppose a piece of aluminium is exposed to air, all around the surface which is exposed to air, it forms a coating of aluminium oxide. Now this fine layer of aluminium oxide, suppose this is a piece of aluminium, over it a coating of aluminium oxide is formed. Now this coating of aluminium oxide will prevent the contact of aluminium with the outside air. Now because the aluminium is not able to come in contact with air further, so its corrosion stops. So it actually acts as a protective layer. So in case of aluminium, it doesn't get spoiled completely, but rather acts as a protective layer around aluminium. Then talking about copper. Now, if you have any copper articles at your home, anything, either utensils or any showcase or anything, at times a very fine green colored layer starts depositing over it. That is because of the formation of basic copper carbonate. Now, it is not pure copper carbonate, it is copper carbonate with hydroxide ions present in it. It's a complex compound which has got copper ions, carbonate ions and hydroxide ions also. That is why we call it basic copper carbonate. Now, basic because hydroxide is basic in nature, so we call it basic copper carbonate. So, a layer of basic copper carbonate which is green in color is formed over copper when copper is exposed to air. Then coming to another metal, that is lead. Now, when lead is exposed to air, it develops a white coating. If you come across any lead pipes at your home, okay, water pipes and all, then you will see over it a very fine white deposits are formed. That is basic lead carbonate. Now, this basic lead carbonate is white in color. Again, it is also called basic because apart from having lead ions and carbonate ions, it also has hydroxide ions. And because of the presence of hydroxide ions in it, it is known as basic lead carbonate. So, it's a kind of complex compound. Then the last one is the silver metal. Now, silver metal we come across very often. If you have seen the silver jewelry, if your mother is having, when it is new, it shines very brightly. But if you observe it after a few months or years, you will see that the silver metal has tarnished. The shine is gone and it starts becoming a bit blackish in color. That is because of the formation of black deposit of silver sulfide. Now, silver sulfide is again formed because of the gases or the polluted gases which are present in air. So, silver combines with those gases and forms a layer of silver sulfide. So, again I am reminding you that corrosion in metals, basically what is corrosion? That when a metal reacts with the air naturally and forms stable compounds, then that is called corrosion. During the corrosion, the quality of metal diminishes and the properties of metals are destroyed. Then coming to the 5 examples, iron on exposure to air forms hydrated ferric oxide, that is Fe2O3.XH2O, which is also called as rust. Aluminium forms a white layer of aluminium oxide and it often acts as a protective coating around aluminium. Then the third is copper. Copper forms green colored deposit which is of basic copper carbonate. We call it basic because of the presence of hydroxide ions in the compound. Then lead forms a white deposit of basic lead carbonate. We call it basic because of the presence of hydroxide ions in the compound. Again, this is also a complex compound. Then comes lastly the silver. Silver forms a coating of black silver sulfide. Now, whatever the articles you can come across at home, please try and observe these kind of coating.